4 weeks, we continue to get absolutely terrible economic figures, and it seems that we are going to a housing crisis that will be even worse than what we witnessed in 2008. Millions of Americans lost their homes at that time, but this time there may be tens of millions around. I know that such an expression may sound overly dramatic, but I believe many of you who feel that way can change your minds after reading this article. Americans need a paycheck to pay rent and mortgage, and now people continue to lose their jobs at an unbelievable pace. On Thursday, we learned that 1.3 million Americans made new claims for unemployment benefit last week. This was worse than expected and represented the 17th week when the number of Americans making new claims for unemployment benefits exceeded 1 million. As I continue to remind my readers every week, the all-time record was just 695,000 for a week before this year. Overall, over 51 million Americans have made new claims for unemployment benefits over the past 17 weeks, and this is the biggest increase in unemployment throughout the entire US history. In fact, the numbers we see should be theoretically impossible. In February, the number of employed Americans reached an all-time high of 152 million, and since then, the number of new unemployment claims represents more than a third of this total. I know that some people are hesitant to use the term economic collapse, but what else can we say? Incredibly, one expert quoted by USA Today is telling us that the number of Americans filing new claims for unemployment benefits could actually increase next week. The 1.3 million total marks the 15th straight weekly decline after first-time claims peaked at 6.9 million at the end of March. But it's the smallest drop yet at just 10,000. That could reflect the spike in coronavirus cases across much of the country, particularly the South and West, and decisions by more than 20 states to pause or reverse the reopening of restaurants, bars, gyms, movie theaters, and other outlets. The rollbacks may spark a new wave of layoffs, especially in hard-hit states like Texas, Florida, Arizona, and California, and possibly even push the claims totals higher. Next week could easily see an increase in initial claims. Economist Ian Shepardson of Pantheon Macroeconomics wrote in a research note, "Housing researchers and activists are warning that millions of people risk becoming homeless if the government does not extend measures, both federally and locally, that were put in place during the pandemic to protect renters." Needless to say, this unemployment tsunami caused many people to fail to pay their rent. In fact, the Census Bureau announced that 11.6 million Americans lived in households that did not pay the latest rent. People who rent have largely been able to survive the initial months of the pandemic due to eviction moratoriums put in place in most states, as well unemployment and federal relief checks. According to the latest weekly Census Bureau data, 11.6 million people live in households that missed their last rental payments. More than 22 million Americans also have no or only slight confidence that they will be able to make next month's rental payments, the figures show. Oh, many Americans also lag behind in mortgage payments. The following comes from Wolf Richter. In April, the share of all mortgages that were past due but less than 30 days soared to 3.4% of all mortgages, the highest in the data going back to 1999. This was up from 0.7% in April last year. During the housing bust, this rate peaked in November 2008 at 2%. In the coming months, millions of Americans will be so far behind in rent payments that they will be released, and millions of other American mortgages will be so far behind that they will be in serious danger of losing their homes. According to Emily Benfer, we could see potentially 20 million to 28 million people being fired from their homes in the coming months. The threat of looming evictions could result in 28 million people being homeless in the United States as a result of the coronavirus pandemic. One expert contends, Emily Benfer, who has spent her career representing homeless families, was recently interviewed by CNBC, where she went into detail about what could be a stark reality for homelessness in the country as a result of the coronavirus. She is currently the chair of the American Bar Association's Task Force Committee on Eviction and co-creator of the COVID-19 Housing Policy Scorecard with the Eviction Lab at Princeton University. We have never seen this extent of eviction in such truncated amount of time in our history, Benfer said when asked about how the current homeless crisis compares to the 2008 housing crisis. She continued, "We can expect this to increase dramatically in the coming weeks and months, especially as the limited support and intervention measures that are in place start to expire. About 10 million people over a period of years were displaced from their homes following the foreclosure crisis in 2008. We're looking at 20 million to 28 million people in this moment, but we now in September facing eviction. We have never seen anything like this before." And of course, Benfer assumes that there will be no other major crisis between now and the end of the year. So what happens if we go to September, October and November, and things in this country once again become haywire? The closer we get to this election, the higher the social tensions and the higher the already is that we can literally see a big bang at any moment. I should also point out that the $600 weekly bonus payments that keep most unemployed Americans afloat will end in July. When these payments stop, millions of unemployed workers will have a much more difficult time to pay rent and mortgage. Most Americans believe that the worst is behind us, but the truth is that we follow an unprecedented economic nightmare. If you follow my work on Top News, you already know how concerned I am for the end and later of this year, and I will fully reveal what I believe is coming in my new book, which will be released later this month. The perfect storm I have mentioned many times over the past few years is now here, and most Americans are completely unprepared for this. I would love to appreciate the summer months as an opportunity to make preparations for the upcoming chaos. As I detailed in 2 days ago, we are currently witnessing a shortage of aluminum cans, soda, flour, canned soups, pasta, and rice across the country. As problems in our nation intensify, famines will worsen. Of course, you have to have a place to store them, to store the materials, and for tens of millions of Americans, keeping their homes in the coming months will be a real challenge. Apparently, we're facing a housing crisis that will be much worse than anything we have experienced during the last recession, and it seems that there is no hope of stopping it unless Congress begins to rain from the sky. Most of the idea, comment, information, and criticism containing in these videos have been created by Daily News Report. Before making any important investment decision, use the information contained in these videos as a starting point for conducting your own research. If you make any investment or legal decision, it is advised to consult an expert before making this decision.